He was trying to photograph the interior through a small window, but the moment he pressed the shutter, a pair of large, ancient eyes flashed out of the darkness. Little Red Hood panicked and ran, only to find the camera strap had snagged on something. He stood there looking at the open door, torn between leaving and retrieving his things. Then he caught a full look at the old man and bolted on instinct. The old man sighed, closed the door, and glanced down at the pocket watch in his hand, clearly a man who kept careful track of time. Inside the main hall of the old building, a funeral was underway. A young boy had died tragically, found stuffed inside an oven. His parents were devastated, their grief beyond words. When the service ended and the family had gone, the old man prepared to proceed with the cremation. At that moment, a young woman appeared at the coffin without anyone noticing her arrival. She reached out to lift the lid. The old man stepped in and stopped her. He assumed she was a family member, but in conversation, he learned her name was Sam, and she had seen a hiring notice outside and come in to apply. At that, the old man smiled to himself with a quiet satisfaction and led her into his office. He couldn't quite understand why someone so young would want to work in a funeral home, so he told her a story, moderately unsettling, to test her nerve. At a cocktail party, a woman in a yellow dress entered a restroom and turned on the light. Something sticky and viscous, like mucus, clung to the switch. She was still puzzling over it when a man knocked on the door, speaking to her in a low, flirtatious tone. He was clearly someone she'd only just met. They agreed to meet on the balcony in 10 minutes. The woman turned back to the mirror, reached into her pocket, and produced 3 men's wallets. She was a practiced pickpocket. One of them belonged to a bearded doctor. She glanced at it without interest and tossed it in the bin. She tidied herself up in the mirror and was about to leave when she noticed a keyhole in the mirror frame. Professional habit kicked in immediately. When she found that the frame was indeed locked, her certainty grew. Something valuable must be hidden inside. She produced a small metal pick from inside her dress and went to work. The lock gave quickly, but the effort cut her finger. While she was tending to the wound, a tentacle from behind the mirror used the moment of distraction to pull the door shut. Now more curious than frightened, she pressed herself against the mirror and tore it open with both hands. There was no treasure inside. What she found made her scream. She slammed the frame shut. Whatever was in there wanted out. After a long moment, silence returned. She cried out, turning her head, but couldn't bring herself to move toward the exit. Eventually, with no other choice, she held her breath and crept toward the door. She made no sound. She moved further and further away. Then a pocket watch dropped to the floor. She stared at it. Something in her stomach dropped. Behind her, the mirror swung open. Inside was a colossal octopus. Its tentacles were enormous. One whipped across the room and wrapped around her. She screamed as she was dragged back, held upright in the opening like a post driven into the ground, crashing in every direction. Then came the sound of something cracking. She went still. The octopus pulled her in and turned off the light. Sam found the story inventive but thought the octopus was a bit of a stretch. Did he have anything more grounded? The old man slid a contract across the desk as he spoke. He said he wasn't interested in whether the stories were realistic, only in what they meant. Good and evil both meet their end eventually. Then he began his second story. As the industrial age gave way to the information age, attitudes shifted and young people found themselves with new freedoms. Outside a university building, a young white man named AK was pitching to incoming female students, talking about gender equality, personal agency, and the importance of safe, consensual relationships. The framing was credible enough. The real purpose was to invite them to a party at his club that night. The girls who accepted a free pocket umbrella had a high probability of becoming targets. Some prey, however, is more dangerous than it appears. Moving through the crowd was a quiet-seeming girl making her way unhurriedly toward the building. AK's awkward friend, Adai, spotted her and gave chase, fumbling through the same pitch with all the grace of a malfunctioning robot. The girl barely heard a word. Then AK appeared, smoothly displaced his friend, and within a few exchanges had arranged to meet this girl, Susan, at the party that night. After she left, the camera lingered on the campus bulletin board. It was covered in missing persons notices. All male students. That evening, AK and his 2 friends arrived at the party downstairs. Susan showed up on time. Without much preamble, AK led her to a room upstairs. At the critical moment, Susan reached into her pocket and produced the umbrella from earlier. AK was visibly reluctant, but his own afternoon speech about respecting women's choices was fresh in everyone's memory. He accepted it, then quietly tossed it aside partway through. They stayed until dawn. When AK woke, Susan was already gone. She had left her phone number on the mirror in lipstick, with a note telling him to call. He wiped it off without a second thought. He had no interest in spending more time on the same person. Then the nausea hit him, a kind he had never felt before. He was bent over the toilet, violently sick. Dai came to check on him and noticed a large rash spreading across his abdomen. AK insisted it was just friction. After Dai left, he stared at his stomach with dread. He went to the hospital. The examining doctor, a bearded man, read the results, froze for several seconds, and walked out of the room without saying a word. AK picked up the chart himself. It said, pregnant. He didn't believe it. He bought medication and drank it all. He was sick again immediately. Standing at the mirror, he saw his abdomen had swelled dramatically, distended and round. He called Susan. After several attempts, she picked up. Without revealing his condition directly, he maneuvered the conversation until she gave him her address. He grabbed his keys and ran downstairs. 3 men in gray robes were standing standing motionless across the street, staring at him. AK groaned. Not now. It turned out his club had a rule. Whenever a member broke the all-time record, the club held a ceremony in his honor, his name mounted in the top center position on the board. Everyone gathered in a circle and hoisted AK into the air so he could hang the placard at the very top. AK could not hold on any longer. He cried out, and a large mass of white fluid erupted from below him. He drove immediately to Susan's address. A middle-aged man answered the door, apparently her father. He took one look at AK and shook his head slowly, with the resigned expression of someone who had seen this before. He and his wife brought AK inside and settled him onto a specialized reclining chair. Susan came downstairs. AK pointed at her furiously and demanded to know what she had done to him. Susan looked at him with complete indifference, turned away, and dialed her next target. AK delivered, with great difficulty, and did not survive the process. Susan's mother took the infant and carried it carefully to a back room. On the way out, she stepped on a small toy. The sound it made set off a chain reaction. More than a dozen infants in the room burst into crying simultaneously. Sam found that story more interesting. She told the old man he had real talent. He took her on a tour of the facility, the various rooms, the corridors, the cold storage, until they arrived at the embalming room, where bodies were prepared for presentation. On the table lay a young woman, but beneath the appearance of youth, her body showed conditions associated with much older age, pressure sores, and traces on the palette of medications used in long-term psychiatric treatment. She was wearing a ring on her left hand, engraved with the words "Till death do us part." The old man began to tell her story. At a wedding, a bearded man could barely contain his joy. He was finally marrying the woman he loved. They exchanged vows, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. The light in the church shifted. His wife began to convulse. She had fallen ill. He woke to find that marriage had become a living nightmare. His wife lay bedridden, unable to care for herself. One day, he blended her food and fed it to her carefully, spoonful by spoonful, and she began to choke. For a fraction of a second he thought, a miracle, then he realized she had simply hiccuped. The revulsion that moved through him in that moment was total. He asked the visiting doctor how much longer this could continue. The doctor said she was in stable condition, could last another 10 years, easily. The bearded man could not last another 6 months. The doctor, reading the situation, quietly took a bottle of strong painkillers from his bag. That night, the bearded man gave his wife a gift, a small sculpture of an Arctic hare, a symbol of freedom. Then he opened the capsules and dissolved the powder into her dinner. He fed her slowly, speaking softly of the good years they had shared. Her body reacted violently. She grabbed his hand, her face contorted in pain. He couldn't bear it. He pressed on her abdomen and made her vomit the medication back up. Torn between love and exhaustion, he collapsed into despair. In his daze, he lost track of her. When he looked up and reached for her, he found a wound on her forehead. She had struck it against the hair sculpture. Panicking, he called the doctor. He described what had happened in a rush of words. The doctor listened, sighed, and told him to dispose of the body and never contact him again. The bearded man found a suitcase. He packed everything carefully, composed himself, and stepped into the elevator as though nothing had happened. A neighbor moved to board it with him. He jammed the closed door button repeatedly, catching the neighbor in the doors. The elevator descended. On the 8th floor, it stopped. He shouted, pried at the doors, got nowhere. His yelling drew an elderly woman from the hallway who knew him. She announced loudly that she was going to call the police. He was on the verge of losing his mind entirely. Then he noticed, blood had seeped through the suitcase and was spreading across the elevator floor, climbing the walls, filling the small metal box with red. He scrubbed frantically. He tried to escape through the roof hatch and fell. In a burst of rage, he tore off his wedding ring and cursed the words "Till death do us part." Then, from inside the suitcase, he heard his wife crying. She had heard everything. The lock on the suitcase popped open on its own. He called her name and moved toward it slowly. The elevator suddenly dropped all the way to the first floor. Through the glass doors he saw, faintly, images from the beginning. The first time they met, the proposal, building a life together. Half an hour later, police opened the elevator doors. Inside was only the bearded man, sitting on the floor, holding their wedding album, murmuring "Till death do us part" over and over again. He had lost his mind. After hearing the story, Sam said she didn't much care for it. The old man brought her down to the basement, the final stop on the tour, the cremation room. The coffin waiting there held the young boy from the beginning, the one who had died so young. As the coffin was about to be slid into the furnace, Sam stopped him. She wasn't there to apply for the job. She had come for the boy's body, and she began to explain why. It was near midnight. Sam had been working her regular babysitting shift at the boy's home. After he fell asleep, she put on some music and danced alone in the living room. The television cut to a breaking news bulletin. A psychiatric facility in town had been breached, and several patients had escaped. Sam paid no attention to it. She stepped outside briefly to watch a thunderstorm. When she took out the rubbish, she didn't notice a window nearby had been smashed open. When she came back to the living room, a strange man was sitting on the sofa. Sam didn't provoke him. She slipped into the kitchen and retrieved a weapon. When she turned around, the man had found his way to the wall behind her, his head covered in blood, disoriented, clearly injured. Sam steadied herself and pressed a cloth to the wound, trying to calm him. The phone rang. Sam was too frightened to answer. The voicemail played. It was the homeowner. The man noticed a drawing on the refrigerator. 4 people. A toy nearby confirmed there was a child in the house. house. He moved toward the stairs. Sam stepped in his way. He used his long legs to send her across the room with a single kick. The phone rang again. Despite his injuries, the man dragged himself to answer it. He was in too much pain to speak, he could only shout toward the receiver. Sam tackled him from behind. Even so, he overpowered her and threw her to the ground, then continued up toward the boys' room. Sam pulled herself up and grabbed an iron bar. She followed. The man pushed open the bedroom door. The boy had already hidden. He couldn't find him until Sam's eyes moved involuntarily toward the hiding place. The man followed her gaze. He smiled. The boy's secret spot had given him away. Sam launched the attack, swinging the bar, leaping forward. The man dodged everything without effort, then systematically beat her down, blow by blow, until she was barely conscious. She dragged herself outside on the floor. In one last surge, she caught him off guard and shoved him off the upper landing. Then she found a television set and brought it down on him. When the homeowners arrived, the house was silent. Debris everywhere, and a strange smell in the air, the smell of something burning. The husband moved the television set. He looked for a long time before he recognized who was underneath it. The babysitter. But something was wrong. Sam, it turned out, was male. The television was still broadcasting. Police had confirmed the identity of the escaped patient. A young woman who called herself Sam, known locally as the Tooth Fairy Killer, convicted on 12 counts of murder. The old man listening to all of this, the bespectacled man who had noticed something wrong with his microwave earlier, was the unscrupulous doctor threaded through all three stories. In the first, he had flirted with the thief in the restroom, an act of infidelity while married. In the second, he had informed AK at the hospital that he was banned from using a surgical knife, implying his medical license had been revoked. In the third, he had encouraged the bearded man to poison his wife and dispose of the body. When the doctor followed the smell and opened the microwave, he found his own son inside. Having heard the Tooth Fairy story in full, the old man in the funeral home showed no particular alarm. He asked, calmly, why the Tooth Fairy had come back. The answer: every victim required a tooth to be taken as a trophy. Last time, there hadn't been time. That was why she had come to the mortuary. To eliminate any witness, the Tooth Fairy drove a blade into the old man's stomach. She delivered a parting remark, contradicting something he had said, and turned to leave. She hadn't taken 3 steps before she heard laughter behind her. The old man stood up from the floor as though nothing had happened. Fluid seeped from the wound. He smiled and told the Tooth Fairy, the position is yours now. She ran. No matter where she went, she returned to the same place. From the moment she had signed the contract, she had become part of the funeral home, bound to it completely. The old man opened the front door. He looked down at the strip of daylight falling across the threshold. He tested it with his cane once, twice. Then he put his hesitation aside and walked slowly out. Halfway down the steps, something changed in him. His body began to contract. Then, in an instant, it turned to ash. With the old man's passing, the next keeper of the funeral home woke with a start on the examination table, body covered in sutured scars. The Tooth Fairy screamed into the dark.